I'm here with John Stonestreet. We're talking about culture and worldview, and I just want to start off by asking you, what is a Christian worldview? What is worldview even, and why is it important?
Yeah, Josh, that's a great question, because I've been kind of working in this area for, 12, 15 years. 12 years ago, no one had heard of that word. Now it's a word that kind of people think they know or not sure, or maybe even have a bad feeling about. But basically, a worldview is simple. It's your view of the world. I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation with someone on an airplane, or a neighbor, or that crazy aunt at Thanksgiving, and you start using words and you realize you don't mean the same thing by God or truth or reality, because we all have kind of a set of idea glasses. Doesn't mean we've always thought through what those are, but through those glasses we see reality. And everybody has one. Everyone has this basic set of assumptions that shades their view of life in the world. And Christians should have a Christian worldview, because we believe that what the Bible gives us is not only true for us, it's actually what Francis Schaeffer called true truth. It's truth about reality. And so that should be our lens. But if we kind of compartmentalize our life, or segment kind of the sacred part of our life, church life, devotional life, from work and school and all that, then what we'll do is our worldview will be shaped by cultural forces. I mean, not devious things trying to necessarily steal our hearts, but just different ideas about life in the world will kind of seep in. So we got to be intentional about how we see the world, what's shaping our view of the world, and that's kind of the stuff of worldview and what it means to have a Christian worldview. Yeah,
so what would be some of the core elements, if you could break it down? I know we have to be a little reductionistic, we don't have quite the time, but what are some of the core elements of a Christian worldview?
Well, the idea is that there are these fundamental assumptions. So our worldview is really made up of all of our beliefs, but if you get to the bottom of it, it's kind of our beliefs about, what is the nature of reality? Is the world a physical place or a spiritual place, or both, right? Is there a God? What role does God have in our world? I think one of the most insidious ways that Christians lose a Christian worldview is by having a personal relationship with Christ, but believing that's private. Right? But the scripture tells us that Jesus Christ is Lord of all. So whether you realize it or not, the world you live in is one that belongs to God, because He created it and He is restoring it. I think another key aspect is what we believe about the value and dignity of human people. It's very easy in our culture to think that someone only has value because of what they look like, or because they do stuff for us, or because they have certain functional capacities. And so if they get too old, or if they have Down syndrome in the womb, then we'll say they're not dignified. A lot of Christians just kind of buy into dignity is acquired. The Bible begins with a remarkable statement that literally changed the course of history, that all humans are made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore all have dignity and value. So every single person, from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death, is infused with dignity and value. Now you start with that one, and that's one of those that once you start building on that, changes business, changes education, changes how we understand the scientific enterprise, changes what we mean by putting up a university, and how we drive, with that crazy driver next door. I mean, it changes everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's lots of people who won't hold to a Christian worldview, yet who will want to take that last one and say, yes, they something internally to them says, yes, we should value other humans, and yet they don't actually have kind of an undergirding to support that. And so one of the things is we do is when we're talking to people, we can help identify, yes, that's a good thing. We're not saying people who don't have a Christian worldview are all bad in some sense. I mean, in some sense we're all bad, but we're not saying that people can't do good things. And many times unbelievers will do good things. But the question is, why are they doing those good things? What's undergirding their morality?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're making me think of just a recent book by an atheist philosopher named Luc Ferry. He's a French from the University of Paris. Wrote a kind of a history of philosophical developments. And as an atheist, he said he didn't really want to write about Christianity. And all of his philosophy friends were like, that's a religion, not a philosophy. But he felt like he had to write it because of that. If you go to the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We just kind of take that for granted. But if you look at the history of the world, history of civilizations, it was quite self-evident that all men weren't created equal, right? I mean, some were tall, some were not, some were men, some were women, some were born, some weren't. Some were Greeks, some weren't, you know.
Yeah.
And so this created slavery, justification for slavery, enslavement, you know, wars, all kinds of different things. Here you have the founders of America jump in and go, it's self-evident that all men are created equal.
Yeah.
And so what Luke Ferry does is he points to that and says, before Christianity, it wasn't self-evident.
Yeah.
He goes. In fact, there's a remarkable line in which he says, the world owes to Christianity this idea that all men are created, or that all men are equal in dignity, which was unprecedented at the time. And listen to this line, and something to which the entire world owes its democratic inheritance. I mean, it's a remarkable thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Now we kind of take it for granted as we look at international things. We want to see human dignity upheld with, you know, for women, for, you know, people that are in ethnic conflicts. But where are we grounding it?
Yeah.
And what we see, I think, especially in the West, is if there's not a grounding, then we find convenient excuses to leave certain people out of, you know, the disabled, for example, the elderly. You know, we have abortion, euthanasia. Certain people then are left out of the equation because there's not a grounding that's consistent and coherent. So that's what Christianity can offer. Now, listen, without talking too long here, Josh, one of the things we also got to recognize is not only do non-Christians recognize dignity, and I think that's part of the image of God that's in us, the truth written on our hearts that Scripture talks about. But a lot of times Christians don't live up to the dignity that they're supposed to. But there's another part of our worldview that explains that, which is that there's something desperately wrong with us, and we're in need of rescue from the outside. So that's another component of a Christian worldview that certainly is personally relevant, but it's also relevant for a culture to realize that.
Yeah. And so one of the things, even as we're talking, that you're kind of, and if you're a believer and you're watching this, you're seeing John kind of even connect some of these things and open up a door for the gospel, because as you're just talking about our fallen nature, and non-Christians are quick to point out that, well, I know hypocrites, and you say yes, and let me tell you why that is. We've got a chink in all of our armors, and this is why, the Christian how the Christian worldview explains that. So if you've enjoyed this segment, join us for the next one. We're going to be talking about some pushback that Christians have had even with this worldview talk, and maybe they have a point. So join us for the next segment.